So, premature atrial contraction. What's going on? So, what's happening is you got bump, 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 thump. All right, what happened? I was beating at a regular rhythm. What happened is I threw in an extra heartbeat. Well, where's this extra heartbeat coming from? Well, it's a beautiful name because it tells you exactly what's going on, right? Premature. The heartbeat came early. How do I know the heartbeat came early? Well, if I'm having a heartbeat once every second, and the next heartbeat comes within half a second, that's a little early. That's a little premature, right? Now, going back to my first question, how do I know it's from the atria? All right, when the atria contracts, what wave is made? The P wave, right? And so that's how we know this is an atrial contraction. And so because my electricity is coming from the atria, but it's not coming from that SA node, my P wave may be inverted, upright, or biphasic, but my PR interval is going to be normal. Um, Now my QRS is 0.06 to 0.10 seconds. Why? Because once the electricity hits that SA node and goes down, everything's going to be normal. 0.06 to 0.10 seconds, narrow, monomorphic. Now, your PACs, you could call them occasional is 4 to maybe 6 or less, and then frequent is going to be 4 to 6 or more. Unfortunately, yeah, it's a little bit goofy there. Probably what's going to happen is somebody who's younger, you can put up with a lot of PACs and not really notice anything. But when you're old, you're not going to be able to deal with too many PACs. Um, anyways, PJCs, the rhythm's going to be irregular. So in 20 words less, this looks like normal sinus rhythm, except you got that thump, you got that extra heartbeat, and it's coming from the atria because it has a funny looking P wave. The P wave doesn't look like all the other P waves in this rhythm. So normal, 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 normal. Whoa, that P wave looks a little different, and that whole P wave came a little earlier than what we expected it, right? PJC, you got the exact same song and dance, except for that extra heartbeat. Instead of coming from the atria, it's coming from the junction. So roughly that AV node. All right, PVC. So how do we know the difference right here? Well, if it's coming from the atria, you always have to have a P wave. But if it's coming from a junction, you don't necessarily have to have that P wave. So the P wave might, the way I remember it, is the P waves are happening before, during, or after, right? So if the P wave is happening before the QRS, how the heck am I going to tell the difference? Well, that between that and a PAC, the PR interval will always be shorter in the PJCs than in the PACs. The next thing is, yeah, that P wave may be absent. And third, it may happen after the QRS. All right. The other thing that you got is, well, how do I know that a PAC is not a PVC? All right. One of the big things is a PAC, once again, is going to have that P wave. A PVC, no P wave, and the QRS is going to be wide. So that's what you got going on there. So what's going on with your atrial rhythms? So what's happening during sinus rhythm is this thing's firing, right? So it's firing 60 to 100 beats per minute. And every time this thing fires, it produces a P wave that looks exactly the same as the last time it fired. But what's happening with atrial rhythm is someplace other than here is firing. So if I fire here, every time this fires, it's going to look exactly the same as it did last time. But that's going to be different than when the SA node fires. All right. So so what's happening with the PACs, right? It may move around in the atria, and so you get a bunch of funny but different looking A waves. P waves right here. Because each time a particular part of the atria fires, it's going to look exactly the same as it did last time. But so that's what you got right here. Now, the next thing we got is think about normal rhythm. All right, electricity comes from the SA node, goes down here to the AV node. right? Once it hits the AV node, how is what happens next any different than normal sinus rhythm? It's totally the same. And so from this point on, it's going to look exactly the same. Why? Because the only part that's different between an atrial rhythm and a sinus rhythm is this right here. This is the only part that's different. Now, why are the waves biphasic and all this other stuff? All right, so let's give you an example. Remember how we already showed you why the P wave was positive in lead 2 during normal sinus rhythm. We'll start the electricity over here, right? So if I'm starting over here, where's my electricity going to go? Well, it's going to go over here, and it's going to go up. So remember, in lead 2, in order to be positive, you had to go down and to our patient's left. Not our left, but the patient's left. Well, if my heart's electricity is going to our patient's right and up, that's going to be considered negative in lead 2, right? I could change the color, and let's say that your P wave started over here. Your P wave starts over here. So what's happening? Electricity is moving this way, but electricity is also moving this way at the same time. And so far the effects kind of cancel each other out, right? But then what's going to happen is, let's say you reach this wall of the heart first, but yet you still got some more to go right here, right? And so you can see how this could explain some of the changing shape of the heart, changing shape right there. And so you get all sorts of different things, but you can see just how where you start determines kind of the shape right here. This would be more of like a flat P wave. Why? Because even though this is negative, this is positive. They'd be weighed equally, and they kind of weigh each other out. But the long story short is each site is going to produce its own unique P waves. If I have a PAC starting right here, it's going to look pretty stinking close to normal sinus rhythm. Why? Because I'm starting at roughly kind of the same place. But yeah, that's kind of the science behind those right there. So atrial fibrillation. So fibrillation means that instead of the heart really beating, it's quivering. Not really beating, not really contracting. So not very organized activity. You're not really going to see any sort of P waves. So because you don't have P waves, you don't have a PR interval. Now, what part of the heart's messed up? It's the top part, right? The bottom part's going to be totally normal. So the QRS is 0.06, 0.10 seconds, narrow monomorphic. Rate is going to vary. So remember that AV node decides fire or not fire. And so a couple of things can happen here. So because the top part of the heart's quivering, that AV node's like, I don't know if that's a heartbeat or not. I really don't think any of this stuff's heartbeats. If that's the case, you're going to have a very slow ventricular response, less than 60 beats per minute. If it's look at, yeah, that was one, no, yeah, no, you're going to have a controlled ventricular response, heart rate 60 to 100 beats per minute. But if that AV node is looking at every single one of those quivers, beat, 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 yeah, all those are beats. You're going to have a very quick heart rate, right? And that's going to be a rapid ventricular response. The ideal is that controlled ventricular response, that heart rate of 60 to 100 beats per minute. Now, needless to say, this is going to be irregular. Why? Because it's quivering, right? You got just all sorts of chaos going on up in that atria. And so the rhythm is going to be extremely irregular. Okay, so this is going to look a lot like, in a sense, like atrial flutter, but the activity is less defined than atrial flutter. In atrial flutter, you can see things that look like P waves. More on that in just a minute. But in atrial fib, you're not. And so the difference between atrial flutter and ventricular flutter is in atrial flutter, it's the top part of the heart that's quivering. And ventricular flutter, it's the bottom part. If you have that, you're dead. We're doing CPR, we're defibrillating you. You're not going to like, hey, how are you doing? No, you're going to be turning blue or gray. So very big deal there. So atrial fibrillation. So what exactly is going on with that atrial fibrillation? So I'm going to draw pictures and hopefully explain what's going on here. So in a nice normal heart, you're going to see, once again, the SA node send electricity to the AV node using these fibers. And so you're going to produce this nice P wave that always looks the same because electricity is starting at the same place, going to the same place. But atrial fib, this heart's been damaged, heart attack, stroke, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, maybe a bad heart valve, whatever. And so we have all these different sites within the heart that are damaged. And so what's going to happen is each of these sites of damage can produce electrical heartbeats and so on. And then on top of that, to make matters even worse, is we'll just pick one at random. So I'd have to keep drawing a little bit more, but let's say this tries to generate a P wave, right? So my electricity is going this way, it's going this way, but then it hits this stuff over here and it can't. So maybe this part of the heart's contracting. Then this one fires over here. But the electricity doesn't get these ones to fire. And then you get this random thing over here firing. And so while the electricity is spreading out this way, let's say this decides to fire. And so you see how this is going to create kind of a very crazy patchwork sort of thing. And so it's not going to be a nice unified contraction. It's not like, hey, this whole thing is contracting at one time. No, you're just getting tons and tons of little segments contracting and relaxing at different times. So while this is contracting, this part of the heart might be relaxing. And this part's setting up to contract. And this part's recovering from a contraction. It's just very patchwork, very, very crazy. And so that's why it's not moving blood like it should. So people that have atrial fibrillation, they get put on Coumadin. Why is that? Because this doesn't move blood very good. And so the blood comes in here and sits. And yes, some of it is going to flow into the ventricles. So about 70% will just come in, flow right to the ventricles without the atria pumping it at all. But because 30% of the blood is just kind of sitting there, it tends to form blood clots, which can then break off and give you a pulmonary embolism, or break off of here and give you a heart attack or a stroke, or some other thing that's very awful. So there's the problem with atrial fibrillation. So what's going on with atrial flutter? Well, once again, the best way to understand abnormal is to understand normal. So what's happening in a normal P wave? Electricity starts here and it moves over here and here. So the whole atria has contracted as one unit. Then what happens is it resets. And so a timer goes off, ding, all right, time to fire again, right? And so that's the normal P wave. We're moving easily, 90% of the blood from here into there, right? So, we're pumping and we're pushing what little blood will normally pull in here into the ventricles. So very, very good push here. So what's happening with atrial fibrillation? But what's happening with atrial flutter? So I'm going to pick a different color for clarity. We'll do purple here. And so what you got is something as follows. Here's my mouse right there. So what will happen is you have some sort of blockage here, electrical blockage. And so for whatever reason, electricity will have trouble moving around here. Now, some of this is because, as you can see, we got a hole here, right? And that's going to be for the superior vena cava. We got another one for the inferior vena cava. We got another one for the, where the tricuspid valve is. Um, you know, and so different places, we aren't going to be able to move electricity through very good. But basically what ends up happening with atrial flutter is the electricity can either go down here. So I'm moving over here into the atria, and so the electricity is going to go up here, it's stimulating the atria to contract, it's moving over here, now the electricity is able to come back over here, and so you see what we're doing is we're creating this circle right here. I'm going to put on my laser pointer so you can better see it. So I'm making this giant circle over and over again. And so what's going to happen is my heart contract, relax, contract, relax, contract, relax, contract, relax up here with the atria. So I can either go this way, counterclockwise, the most common, or I could go clockwise. Anyways, you don't really have to worry too much about clockwise or counterclockwise, but you see how this is going over and over in a circle. And so that's what's happening with atrial flutter. Okay, so next thing we got, we're talking about the atrial flutter. So what's going to happen, the P waves are called flutter waves. So technically there are no P waves. And so this is more of a functional thing. That's something you would see on an EKG as to why that is. So what's happening is with a good P wave, the atria are contracting, moving the blood from the atria to the ventricles. Pretty good. With a flutter wave, not so much. With a normal P wave, electricity moves from one side of the atria all the way to the other, and it's all gone. With a flutter wave, the electricity just keeps on going on and on and on in a circle. It never stops. And so that's why. But on your EKG, your P waves are pretty much going to look just like your flutter waves. More on that just a second. So because there are no P waves, you're not going to have a PR interval. Now, remember, I've only messed up the top part of the heart. The bottom part of the heart is working just fine, totally normal. And so what's going to happen? Your QRS is going to be 0.06 to 0.10 seconds, narrow monomorphic. Now, your rate, what do you mean by a heart rate, right? And so the atria are going to be beating a lot faster than the ventricles. So usually the atrial rate is going to be about 2 to 3 times faster than whatever the ventricle rate is. And so the ventricle rate, it can is usually faster than 100 beats per minute. A lot of times it will center around about 150. Now this can be regular or irregular, right? That 2 to 1 or that 3 to 1 doesn't have to be fixed. So you might be 2 2 2 2 3 3 3 3 2 2 2 2 3 3 3 3 4 or whatever. And so because I'm switching what I am, it can definitely change it. From regular to irregular. A lot of times, though, it's more regular than irregular. So this is going to be a lot like atrial fibrillation, but it's more organized. The flutter waves are better at moving blood from the atria to the ventricles than just the fibrillation. Okay, so why is this not sinus tachycardia? I mean, if I look at the EKG, they both kind of look like I have P wave. Look, I got a P wave in front of the QRS. My heart rate's greater than 100 beats per minute. Let's say I have a regular A flutter. Why is that not sinus tachycardia? All right, here's the reason. So you look at those P waves, quote unquote, they're really F waves, and you see about 2 to 3 P waves for every QRS. That's a good hint that, hey, look, you're not dealing with sinus tachycardia. You're dealing with atrial flutter. And so what does this look like? This is going to look like your sawtooth pattern. Unfortunately, I didn't do quite justice, but you see 1, 2, 3 P waves for every QRS right here. If I had 2, that's also going to be a hint. And the other thing is the P waves for atrial flutter aren't going to look like normal P waves. Their shape's going to be a little different. That's a more subtle point, but that is still a difference. Okay, so multifocal atrial tachycardia. And so what's going to happen here is, remember kind of that picture I showed you with atrial flutter, how the heart was kind of like a patchwork and stuff. And so when the electricity tried to spread, it couldn't fully spread because there's different things that were blocking it. Well, multifocal atrial tachycardia kind of works that same way, but a little different. So what will happen is, yeah, the heart is kind of like a patchwork of different places that can start a P wave, but once a P wave starts, it goes through the whole part of the atria, and so it shuts down, these other parts of the heart that want to generate a P wave. Those parts are called foci, something that could generate a heartbeat. Anyways, because we have multiple spots within our atria that are generating their own unique P wave, right? These multiple spots, these multifoci, are doing a couple of things. Number one, we're producing different P waves. So three or more, I'm going to have foci. I got three or more P waves. Each foci is going to produce its own unique P wave. All right. Why am I saying in lead 2? Right? That's going to be the same story no matter what lead you look in, right? But you want to just pick a lead and stick with it. Here's why. If I look at lead 1 versus lead 2 versus lead 3 versus V1, right? That's 4 different viewpoints. I'm going to see things very differently, right? It's like if I'm listening to the news, let's say I'm listening to CNN. All right, Bill 147 was passed. This is an amazing bill. It will make America so great. And then I changed to a different radio station. Oh man, what an awful bill. Did the bill change? No, but people's viewpoint, our perspective on that viewpoint changed. That bill changed. Well, we don't want to look at, P wave for heartbeat 1 and lead 1, then heartbeat 2 and lead 2. It's like, okay, well, these P waves look different. It's because something different's happening with the heart, or is it because my viewpoint has changed? And so that's why we got lead 2 and we're just sticking with it. Okay, so your PR interval is going to vary, right? Anywhere from 12 to 20 minutes. It'd be like saying, oh, people that live in Greensboro let's a bad example, Winston-Salem, take 12 to 20 minutes to get here, right? So if it's taking you longer than 20 minutes, you're not living in Winston-Salem. If it's taking you less than 12 minutes, you're not living in Winston-Salem, right? There's no way you're going to get to Winston-Salem in 12 minutes. So, you kind of get that idea, right? So that PR interval is going to vary within 12 to 20 seconds, right? But it's not going to be constant. Why? I'm not starting and stopping at the same place every single heartbeat, right? Some heartbeats I'm really far away from that SA node, that AV node. Some that I'm really close to that AV node. So that PR interval is going to vary. All right. Now, I'm not touching the bottom part of my heart. Why? Because this is the atrial problem. The top part of my heart is the problem, not the bottom part, right? And so everything down below is going to be totally normal. My QRS is 0.06 to 0.10 seconds, narrow monomorphic, all right? And my heart rate is going to be greater than 100 beats per minute. Whoa, wait a minute, Dr. Perkins. You said the bottom is going to be normal. Yeah, so the only thing that the top part of the heart controls, in terms of the bottom, is going to be the rate and rhythm, right? Other than that, yeah, your QRS is going to be totally normal for any sort of sinus problem, any sort of atrial problem, any sort of junctional problem, right? All right, because we're not affecting the bottom part of the heart other than the rate and the rhythm. Anyways, this says it's a tachycardia. So this is a fast heart condition. All right, so my heart rate has to be greater than 100 beats per minute. All right, and so is this going to be regular or irregular, right? So imagine I got a class that I got 3 or more teachers teaching this class. So one day I show up, I'm teaching the class. The next day, Dr. Mosley, then I'm teaching the class. Then Dawson's teaching the class. Then Rouse is teaching it. You're like, what the heck? This is the most chaotic class I've ever been in. And that's exactly right. That'd be extremely confusing. Same idea right here. Your rhythm's going to be definitely kind of irregular right there. All right. Now, why isn't this sinus tachycardia? What's going to be my clue that, hey, look, this isn't sinus tachycardia? Well, what's going to happen is I'm going to have 3 or more P wave shapes, right? Versus my sinus rhythm, I'm starting at the exact same spot every single heartbeat. So every single P wave is going to look exactly the same. All right. Now, what about my PR? Well, if I'm starting at a different place, I'm going to take a lot longer, a lot shorter to get home, right? Let's say instead of working at ECPI, every day I'm coming from a different place. So I work at ECPI one night, the next night I'm working at Lowe's, the night after that I'm working at Walmart, the night after that I'm working at Target. It's not going to take me 20 minutes to get home every single night like clockworks. No, right? The amount of time it's going to take me to get home will vary um, right there. And so, yeah, that PR is going to vary. And so those are 2 big hints. This is not sinus tachycardia, right? So in sinus tachycardia, the P waves are uniform and the PR is going to be constant. In a junctional, what's going to happen is, why is this not junctional tachycardia? The P wave shapes can be positive, and they're also going to vary. In a junctional tachycardia, they're going to be uniform because I'm coming from the same place. It's not coming from the right place, but I'm coming from the same place, and so my P wave shapes aren't going to vary in a junctional tachycardia, but they will in this multifocal atrial tachycardia. And then the other thing is my PR in my multifocal atrial tachycardia is going to be longer than 0.12 seconds. With that junctional tachycardia, it's less than 0.12 seconds. All right, why is this not wandering atrial pacemaker? The only difference between multifocal atrial tachycardia and wandering atrial pacemaker is the heart rate. And a multifocal atrial tachycardia, the heart rate's greater than 100 beats per minute, but in wandering atrial pacemaker, it's 60 to 100 beats per minute. So that's what you got there. All right, wandering atrial pacemaker. So it's going to be the exact same thing as multifocal atrial tachycardia, except for the heart rate. So with wandering atrial pacemaker, the heart rate is 60 to 100 beats per minute. Multifocal atrial tachycardia, the heart rate is going to be faster than 100 beats per minute. It's in the name. Tachycardia is greater than 100 beats per minute. So why is this not normal sinus rhythm? Well, in normal sinus rhythm, all heartbeats are starting from that SA node. And so you're going to have P waves all look the same. But in wandering atrial pacemaker, you have multiple different spots within the atria that are generating P waves. So each time a different site within the heart fires, it's going to look totally different than when the SA fired. But it's going to look exactly the same as the last time that site within the heart fired. So every time site A fires, it's going to look exactly the same as it did last time site A fired. Every time site B fires, it's going to look exactly the same as when site B fired. But site B will not look like site A, and it's not going to look like that SA node. All right, so because we have multiple sites that are generating these heartbeats, we're going to get 3 or more P wave shapes in lead 2. Why is that important? Because if I change from lead 2 to lead 1 to AVR, I'm going to get totally different P wave shapes. It's not because and then I'm going to have to figure out, okay, is this happening because my heart's doing something different, or is it happening because I'm looking at the heart differently? Right? Who knows? Okay, anyways, your PR interval is going to vary. Why? Because I'm coming from different parts within the atria. But because I'm coming within the atria, my PR interval will be 0.12 to 0.20 seconds. So now that I've hit that AV node, everything there below is going to be totally normal. 0.06 to 0.10 seconds. That's the definition of narrow. It's going to be monomorphic. Why? Because every time my bottom part of the heart fires, it's because that AV node. Electricity is coming from the same place, going to the same place. Within the ventricles, my QRS are all going to look the same. All right. Now, what's going to happen is because the AV node is being stimulated by the atria, and different parts of the atria are firing, it's going to be an irregular rhythm, right? It's going to be fairly regular, but it's going to still be a little irregular. But my heart rate's going to be 60 to 100 beats per minute by definition. If it's greater than 100 beats per minute, that's when we call it multifocal atrial tachycardia. All right. Well, hopefully that helps. And I'll start talking about the other types of rhythms here shortly.